What does it have to do with? Hiding his protection racket, Soros, his targeting racket of his business rivals, and the fact that the Biden team was profiting handsomely from all of this and their protection of the protection racket. So I saw a story at the Free Beacon I'll get to in a moment from yesterday where George Soros, again, liberal, very wealthy liberal, activist at heart, where George Soros is pumping a bunch of money into the 2020 election cycle. You got to add up still. Now, the question you should always be asking when you see big money, candidly, folks on either side, it's not just a specific attack on Soros, who's a liberal. You should always ask the question, if you're interested in honest and transparent government, why would anybody on either side spend a lot of money to buy off a politician? Fair question, right? To buy off political races. What's their agenda? I'm not suggesting that should be squelched. Money, in my opinion, in politics is a form of speech. If that money buys ads, you're allowed to speak like anyone else. But I think transparency is generally a good thing as long as it's not used to attack other people. I mean, attack like against the law. Political attacks obviously are fair game. So what's Soros' agenda? Why is he spending so much money all the time? And why is he resurfacing in this 2020 election with a record spend to try to keep Donald Trump and others out of office? Ladies and gentlemen, Soros is hiding something. It's the last time I'm going to mention it for a while because I don't like to beat you over the head with it, but my new book is out, Follow the Money. Here's one of my copies here. And chapter 1 of the book, which you'll see right here, is called, and you probably can't read that, Insane in Ukraine. Chapters about what George Soros was trying to hide in the 2016 election to try to get Donald Trump out of office then, and why he's terrified that Donald Trump might get reelected. It's all lined out in the book in detail, but I want to give you a little hint about what's in the book in the first chapter. You need to read this before you vote, so you understand why all this liberal money is being flushed into the United States to keep Donald Trump from winning. George Soros, ladies and gentlemen, was heavily involved in the Ukraine mess. Ukraine, the same country where Hunter Biden was hired for a lucrative position to influence his father, at the time Vice President Biden, who was the point man in Ukraine. There was a lot of Soros money and influence being floated around in Ukraine. The fake whistleblower who initiated the impeachment hoax, I'm going to say this plainly, worked with Biden in the past, knew exactly what the Trump administration was going to find in Ukraine: influence peddling with the State Department, money changing hands, corruption. They had to make Donald Trump go away. So when Donald Trump called the new Ukrainian president, remember the call that became the subject of the impeachment hoax, and started inquiring about corruption in Ukraine that we must look into, the Biden camp panicked. They used their whistleblower. It's all laid out in the book, ladies and gentlemen. Follow the Money. It's the title of the book. The whistleblower knew what they had to do. The fake whistleblower and his army of people behind him knew to contact Adam Schiff immediately, and they panicked and they had to get Trump out of office because they knew Trump was onto the scam. What was the scam in Ukraine? Well, for that, I have to go back to John Solomon, who's cited pretty extensively in my book. And I have to go back to this old piece he wrote at The Hill. What were they hiding in Ukraine? That when Trump got wind of it, they panicked and tried to impeach him over it through a fake whistleblower. And how does that relate to George Soros and his big money spends now? The Hill, George Soros' secret 2016 access to state, talking about the State Department, exposes big money hypocrisy of Democrats. I thought the Democrats were really concerned about money in politics, or as Sheldon Whitehouse says, dark money. Democrat Senator disaster, as you saw in the Amy Coney Barrett, he's dark money in politics. Ladies and gentlemen, George Soros was using our State Department staff in Ukraine to gain influence and leverage over his business rivals. Oh, yeah. And our Department of State under Barack Obama dutifully responded. Wait. Liberal mega donors can buy influence in our State Department to gain leverage over their business rivals in foreign countries? Oh, yes, they can. Let's look at John Solomon's piece at The Hill. This is fascinating because there's a whole chapter in the book on this. Spent a lot of time on this. The footnotes are extensive, by the way. It's about 20 pages of them. John Solomon, The Hill. By the way, this article will be in the show notes today. Read it. It's an older article, but it's worth your time. For example, one Department of Justice investigation in 2014 targeted a Ukrainian oligarch by the name of Dmitry Firtash. Oh! Firtash and Soros both have significant energy interests in Europe and rival plans to rebuild Ukraine. After Firtash's indictment by our Justice Department, Soros's business announced plans, wow, that's convenient, to invest $1 billion in Ukraine. Wow, business rival gets taken out. All of a sudden, Soros shows up with a whole boatload of dough. Since then, significant problems have arisen with the DOJ's case against Firtash, that's Soros's business rival, thwarting efforts to extradite Firtash to the U.S. for trial. You know where Firtash conveniently shows up as well? In Glenn Simpson, the owner of Fusion GPS, or co-owner, in his 2007 Wall Street Journal piece, where he has an unusual interest in Dmitry Firtash, who is George Soros's business rival. Does Soros have a relationship with Glenn Simpson? Why are they so interested in Firtash? Soros basically buying influence with the Justice Department of the United States and the State Department, not because he cares about the benefit of our country, but because he cares about taking out a business rival because he has $1 billion investment in Ukraine? Kind of weird, no? I thought the Democrats cared about the influence of big money in politics. You're not remotely interested why George Soros poured huge dollars into the 2016 election and the 2020 election to combat a president interested in corruption in Ukraine while he was donating to people who were targeting his business rivals in Ukraine? Not interested in that at all? Not even a little bit? Dad? Well, Trump knew what was going on in Ukraine. So did a lot of Trump's people. So those people who wanted to cover up George Soros's influence peddling operation in Ukraine to target business rivals, those people had to be taken out because Soros and his operators there in Ukraine, they didn't want to be uncovered. So what happened? Let's look at this second screenshot from John Solomon's piece. Well, you had people who knew, and listen, I'm not defending Manafort or Firtash. Let me be crystal clear. I'm simply suggesting I find it awfully odd Soros donates an amount of money to liberals who run a government that then go and target his business rivals. And then, in fact, they target people looking into it. It says, on another front, a Ukrainian nonprofit funded in part by Soros was a cheerleader for the discovery of documents in Ukraine during the 2016 election that showed Paul Manafort received millions in payments from Ukraine's Russia-friendly political machine. In the Black Ledger, by the way, which has never been authenticated. The revelation led to Manafort's resignation and eventual prosecution. This time, philanthropy and politics found common ground for the Clinton backing Soros. And when Ukraine's general prosecutor sought to investigate one of the country's nonprofits partially funded by Soros during 2016, the State Department pressured Ukrainian officials to drop the case. Ladies and gentlemen, do you see what's going on here? A major liberal mega donor, George Soros, millions of dollars, had business interests in Ukraine, needed his rivals taken out, donates to the Obama administration. At the same time, the Department of Justice and others start investigating and doubling down on his business rivals, while Soros as well people start to look at him, and then his group shows up on a do not prosecute list by a Ukrainian prosecutor looking into Soros's influence operation in Ukraine. Soros gets a protection racket from the U.S. State Department on his side and gets a hit squad to go after his business rivals on the other side. Trump and his team knew what was going on in Ukraine. They started asking questions. All of a sudden, a fake whistleblower and a bunch of Democrat deep state bureaucrats in the National Security Council invent a fake line of attack about Trump's quid pro quo in Ukraine, totally made up, fabricated. They used to impeach him. Why? To get him away from the Ukrainian mess. All of this is happening, by the way, as Biden's son has a lucrative position in Ukraine with an influential company who knows some of these people. And any mention of the owner of that company, owner of Burisma, was struck from the record. The U.S. ambassador at the time, Jeffrey Pyatt, was told not to talk about the owner of Burisma after Hunter Biden got hired on this Ukrainian natural gas company, Burisma. So there are three things going on here to sum this up. Now you'll see why. I'll get to this free beacon story in a minute. Soros is pumping a bunch of money into this campaign because God forbid this all comes out. There are three things going on. Number one, the Biden family's getting rich in Ukraine. They don't want anybody to know about it. Trump sniffs it out. Number two, Soros is getting a protection racket. Do not prosecute my open societies, foundation link groups, and where my money's going. Three, DOJ and other ones. Yeah, you know, if I check this out, you guys may want to look at this guy Firtash, who just conveniently happens to be a rival to George Soros. Those three things are going on. A targeting operation, a protection racket, and a financial, basically RICO scheme here where the Biden family's getting rich and maybe kicking up money to, quote, pop Biden himself. Now you see why when Trump started sniffing around in Ukraine, all these fake whistleblowers appeared out of nowhere. Alarm bells started going off everywhere. Now look at this. The Washington Free Beacon story. Excuse me. This will be in the show notes too. Soros triples election spending, pouring $70 million into 2020 efforts.
Oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, why do you think George Soros, listen, I don't care how much money you have, $70 million is a lot of money. Why is George Soros and his operation in such a panic? And why is the left in such a panic every time you mention Soros, which, by the way, every time you do, I mention him twice more. Every time the media doesn't matter, people at Media Matters, every time they say, oh my gosh, this is anti-Semitic. That is, you disgust me with your filth. Anti-Semitic, coming from the anti-Semitic left, which hates Israel. This has absolutely nothing whatsoever. I'll be honest with you. I didn't even know George Soros' religion until these kooks at these left-leaning groups decided to try to distract us with this is anti-Semitic. That's why they're doing this. We will double down precisely because I know the left is terrified. They always go to these, you're a racist, you're an anti-Semitic. Whenever you're over the target, they go to that because they think it'll scare you. They know it has nothing to do with that. They're just making it up. What does it have to do with? Hiding his protection racket, Soros, his targeting racket of his business rivals, and the fact that the Biden team was profiting handsomely from all of this and their protection of the protection racket.
You just heard Dan Bongino.